Hi there, fellow notebook enthusiasts. Before Apple allows us reviewers to properly dissect their newest MacBook Air, an old acquaintance deserves some attention. Before the new Air launches in all its colorful glory, the MacBook Pro 13-inch got a little treatment and is actually the first notebook to launch with Apple's latest SoC, the M2. Apart from the new chip, the MacBook Pro is pretty much identical to last year's model. So let's see if this is worth its €1,600 or $1,300 starting price, or if Apple should have skipped the upgrade altogether. While there is nothing new in terms of chassis design, the MacBook Pro looks as nice as it did when it was first introduced a couple of years ago. Build quality is still excellent, and the only design aspect that appears a little dated are the relatively thick bezels around the 13.3-inch display. The new notebook is still from Apple's USB-C only days, or what others would describe as the dark dongle era of mobile computing, and comes with only two USB-C Thunderbolt 3 ports and an audio combo port. While both ports carry DisplayPort signals, the small MacBook Pro can only be connected to one additional external monitor. Unfortunately, this also means that MagSafe is not making an appearance and is still reserved for the new MacBook Air and the larger MacBook Pros. We found Wi-Fi still to be a bit lacking, especially compared to the Windows competition. Like the M1 before it, the new M2 chip still just offers Wi-Fi 6 with 80 MHz. You will most likely not have any problems during regular use, but for larger file transfers or downloads, you might want to get a dongle for wired connections. In terms of inputs, it is more of the same from last year's model again, and we are greeted with the same keyboard and trackpad. The keyboard is still solid, gone are the terrible scissor switches from the last Intel generations, and the trackpad is still one of the best you can get in a mobile device. While the display isn't offering fancy features like a mini LED backlight or a smooth 120Hz refresh rate, it's still a great screen. With its 2560 by 1600 resolution, content is crisp and vibrant. Brightness and contrast on the same good levels as last year's model, and color reproduction is good out of the box and can get further improved with manual calibration. You can find additional information in our written review, so please follow the link in the description below. Alright good people, let's see what is actually new about the M2. My colleague Andreas was hard at work to bring you all the juicy details about Apple's new chip. And please don't forget to subscribe for much more detailed coverage about it coming soon. While the new MacBook Air will be available in a few different configurations for the M2, the MacBook Pro is only available with the highest tier variant. The new chip comes with 8 CPU and 10 GPU cores, and you can choose between 8, 16 or 24GB of LPDDR5 6400 RAM. While the M1 was a completely new design, the M2 is more of an evolutionary than revolutionary step. The hybrid chip consists of 4 efficiency cores running at 2.4 GHz and 4 performance cores running at roughly 3.4 GHz. While the manufacturing process was optimized, we are still at TSMC's 5nm process, and the performance gains mostly come from more juice available to the CPU. I guess physics are still a thing even for Apple. In terms of raw CPU performance, we saw improvements between 10 to 20% compared to last year's model. Performance is extremely stable and can beat the latest offering from AMD, the 6800U for example. Intel's Alder Lake P chips are still faster, but they need a ton of power and are not nearly as efficient as Apple's new SoC. As a testament to efficiency, the M2 offers the same performance on battery compared to when it's plugged in. For all the detailed benchmarks in synthetics like Cinebench or Geekbench, please head over to our website. With our comparison tool, you can easily put the latest offerings from AMD, Intel and Apple side by side to see how they differ in performance. Benchmarks aside, the small MacBook is extremely snappy in real-world tests. You will probably not notice any difference between the M1 and the new M2, but this only shows how good last year's chip has been already. While the 13-inch laptop won't be the first choice for creative power users, We ran some quick tests in creative applications like Photoshop, Premiere Pro and Resolve 17. The same snappiness translates to these applications as well, and especially Photoshop performance while editing high-resolution images was really impressive. We use Resolve 17 for our video editing here at Notebook Check, and the MacBook had absolutely no problem with editing and playing back 4K RAW footage from our Blackmagic camera. While performance gains in the CPU department have been already solid, GPU scores get a significant bump with around a 40% improvement across the board. It's still well behind the 14-core GPU from the M1 Pro you can find in the entry-level 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook Pros. But compared to the competition, the M2 can hold its own. The iGPUs of both Intel's Iris Xe and AMD's new Ryzen U chips are easily beaten. While there are only a handful of games running natively on the Mac and therefore on the M2, for those that do run, we see the same 40 to 50% improvements compared to last year's M1. That said, gaming on Mac has a long way to go, and we can only hope that more game developers will take the platform seriously in the not so distant future to take advantage of the available performance. Most of the time you will probably never hear anything from the MacBook Pro. In typical Apple fashion, the chip will get very hot before the fan starts to spin up. That means that even in some of our benchmarks, this thing stays completely silent. Coming from Intel or AMD based laptops, it is insanely impressive seeing such a small device chewing through multiple Cinebench runs without making a sound. But as soon as you put very long loads or combined CPU and GPU loads on the M2, the system can get quite audible, and at around 3000 RPM, the fan noise can get a little annoying. Temperatures are usually well controlled during normal use. As I stated earlier, the MacBook Pro isn't your creative powerhouse like its bigger siblings, and the cooling solution isn't quite able to keep up with the chip under longer combined loads. In our stress test we see temperatures around 98 C and a power budget of around 28 to 30 watts, which is a little below the maximum of 35 watts for the chip. Away from the wall, Apple once again demonstrates what power efficiency really means. In our Wi-Fi web surfing test we documented almost 20 hours of runtime before we needed to charge the MacBook Pro. These are numbers the Windows competition can only dream about and puts Apple's devices consistently in the top spots in our database. Alright guys, let's wrap things up. The MacBook Pro 13-inch feels a little like the black sheep in Apple's lineup, between the powerful 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros with all their fancy new tech and the upcoming MacBook Air. We get the same chassis, ports, display and overall hardware as the years before. And even the touch bar is back for a spin, while it's already phased out on all the other Apple notebooks. So while this might be the last time we see a 13-inch MacBook Pro in this form, it is a farewell with a bang. It's simply a really good notebook that, by the means of Apple's newest in-house chip design, can easily keep up in today's market. Performance is again really good, along with class-leading efficiency offering mostly silent operation and insanely long runtimes. The speakers, display and inputs are still tough to beat, and while the design might be a few years old, it's somewhat iconic and is far away from looking dated. As always, you can find much more details in our written review. Just follow the links in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked our video, please help us out by hitting the like and the subscribe button on your way out. I'm Alex, you watched a Notebook Check laptop review and I can't wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.